Hi, this is Lindsay, one of the co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Throughout history, the course of sports has been shaped by one thing: the fans.
From the moments you never dreamed of,
Bobby Womack has saved the USA's life in this World Cup! Paul, the runner! Loose ball! It's good! Gonzaga! The slipper still fits!
To the moments that still give you nightmares.
Behind the bag! It gets through Buckner! Here comes Knight and the Mets win it! He's in! Patriots win the Super Bowl! Brady has his fifth!
through the good and the bad, fans have helped change the games we watch and the players we love.
They may not be the most logical people.
You are a factory of sadness! I'll see you Sunday.
But they know their teams better than anybody.
They'll blow in the ninth.
You may not always see them, but you know where to find them.
After all, there's nothing quite like the view from the cheap seats.
Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network.
Grab a chair and enjoy all there is in
The cheap seats.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back once again up into the cheap seats. Starting to get a little bit frigid here as football season progresses, or maybe you're just starting to get your college basketball underway. Either way, John and I have some big thoughts about both of those things this week. As always, on a Tuesday, brought to you by Public House Media. I'm Josh Powers. He's John Lauder. John, say hello to the people out there.
Hello, everyone. It was an interesting weekend for me, Josh. After starting 1-4 in fantasy football, I have now won 4 out of my last 5 weeks and am making the charge. On the other hand, I finally lost in my eliminator pool because, God forbid, the Saints could beat the terrible Falcons.
Oh, my gosh.
It was a really weird weekend, I feel like, in the NFL. Very strange.
Yeah, no question about that. That was definitely an upset, but you know the NFC South is I don't know, it's topsy-turvy, and yeah, that's a big loss for the Saints, really.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got enough of a lead to where they're comfortable in the division race and the playoff
Especially
race.
Carolina lost too, but
yeah, so not much of a setback for sure. But
the Browns won, Miami won again. Like what is going on?
It's an upside down kind of world.
The
yeah.
Jets won a game. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, it's upside down, no question about it, and that sort of seems to be the theme of things. Not going to talk a ton of NFL today.
No, you and Kayla can get to that later on today.
Yeah, we'll worry about that this evening for sure. But bigger things seem to have happened that are even more confusing in the realm of college sports. I think it was on the same day the news came down that Chase Young, the defensive end from Ohio State, and James Wiseman, the basketball player, the center for Memphis, each gets suspended for violating NCAA rules. You know, when I came across that news on Twitter, I was sitting in a buddy's house, and the first thing he said to me was, didn't the NCAA just pass a rule where this wasn't going to happen anymore? They did not. And it just goes on to remind us what a ridiculous organization the NCAA is for punishing a couple of kids for just living their lives.
Yeah, excuse my language, Josh, but it's just a shit show. It's really embarrassing, and it's starting to actually annoy me because we've gotten to the point now where it seems like college, you know, these colleges and universities and the NCAA seem to stick their nose where it doesn't belong and worry about the small things instead of the bigger issues that are surrounding the sport, whether it be you know, the issues that happened with Sandusky, with Larry Nassar, and on and on and on and on and on. But instead, let's punish Chase Young for $300 and James Wiseman for something that happened when he wasn't even at Memphis yet.
Right.
And look, I give Memphis credit. I know a lot of people were saying it was a bad move to have Wiseman play, but I disagree. They were granted a stay. Mm-hmm. They said he could play. They owe the NCAA nothing. And Weissman's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. If the rules were the way they should be, he'd be in the NBA right now, which is the
Right.
way it should be anyway, because he's clearly ready. He was ready at 17, forget now. In fact, he probably still is 17. But these rules are arbitrary, they're obnoxious, and they just take away from everything on the field and on the court. Now, look, Memphis didn't need Weissman in this game. Ohio State beat Maryland by 59 points. So it's not like they needed Chase Young. But it's absurd to me that these kids, they're kids. It's just ridiculous. And the NCAA just cannot ever seem to get out of its own way. And honestly, I'm getting tired of it.
Yeah, and quite frankly, the deal that Chase Young got for his flight for his girl to go to the Rose Bowl, if that was between $200 and $300, that's actually a pretty good deal.
Yeah, he should be celebrated for that steal right there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where he booked his flight from. Maybe, I mean, if we're gonna take investigations this far, and that what's ridiculous about that, even more so, is that he paid the thing back. Right? There's no outstanding money. He owes nobody anything.
Nope.
He owes the NCAA nothing. He owes whoever the family friend was that he borrowed the $300 from nothing. He owes his girl nothing. I don't know. Hopefully they're still together. That would be that's great. I don't know. Maybe his girl owes him a little bit of money, but let's not get into the relationship stuff with that. But it's just so silly. For the NCAA to come out and suspend a kid between 2 and 4 games for a matter of $300 is a greater offense than Buford Tannen shooting Doc Brown in Back to the Future 3 for $80 over the matter of a thrown horseshoe. It's silly, and it might as well be just as fictional a story that we just need to go back in time and correct. It's so silly, and I don't know. With the Weissman thing, John, that almost makes a little bit more sense simply because there's a lot of moving parts. Weissman is engaged in essentially suing the NCAA in response. And what's a little bit weird on the whole thing is Penny Hardaway was essentially already determined a booster for contributing a significant sum of money to Memphis before he was ever hired as head coach. So, I mean, there's a little bit of potential corruption there, I suppose. But again, that's a matter of what, $11,000, I think I read, to help Weissman and his family move to the Memphis area. Now, that's not an insignificant sum of money for sure. But no, that's probably about right. But if Hardaway is considered a booster at that point, then he's considered a booster at that point. Now that he's the head coach, boy, that complicates things a little bit for me.
Sure, it does. But Memphis made the decision to hire Penny Hardaway. They didn't have to do that.
Right.
Penny Hardaway is an alumnus of the school. He has every right to be a booster and provide money to the school. And he was Weissman's AAU coach. So if he wants to help the family out, good for him. Penny Hardaway made what, $150 million or something like that in his NBA
something
career.
Like that.
And the other thing that's so funny to me, Josh, is we're talking about these sums of money: $300, which is literally a pittance, and $11,000, which no doubt is a lot of money, but it's a pittance for Penny Hardaway. And in a couple of months, both of these athletes are going to be multimillionaires because Chase Young is going to go number 1 in the NFL draft unless that team wants a quarterback. And James Weissman is going to go either 1, 2, or 3 in the NBA draft. So this is all going to be laughed at in a couple months anyway. The whole thing is just, it's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
And this isn't the first time that Memphis has had to deal with eligibility issues or potential corruption issues. You know, they've got a little bit of a history on both the football and the basketball side.
Yeah, well, hey, Derrick Rose, did he take the SATs? Did he not?
Right. But really, does that matter? And John, I think that goes all the more to say, to argue what we have before about the amateurism aspect of college sports. Frankly, those programs exist to make the schools money. Yeah. And if they exist to make the schools money, then we really should just throw out, if in my opinion anyway, all of the pretense about college athletes having some kind of level of purity that they need to maintain to retain their eligibility to play.
Yeah, and the other thing is, this is also why there should be no one and done.
Yeah.
In college basketball. Now, in college football, I understand why you need to be out of high school for 3 years. I know people were saying after Trevor Lawrence's freshman year, oh, he could have went right to the NFL. That's a pile of garbage. He actually has been up and down this year, and he still has one more year before he can go to the league anyway. So with college football, that's a little different. But with college basketball, there's no reason why these guys should be playing for a year, because they're clearly mercenaries. They don't care about college. We all know it's a facade, and yet they do it anyway. And for anybody who would say, oh, you know, if you let them go straight out of high school, it's going to negatively affect the college game. No, it's not. Because at the end of the day, as good as a lot of these one-and-done players are, you're going to tell me that fans of Duke are going to stop rooting for Duke if they don't have Zion Williamson? So that's utterly ridiculous. The colleges survived before the one-and-done, and they will survive again once it's gone. So it's just time to remove it. It's a farce. It helps no one, and it just creates more corruption and more issues that you just don't need to have.
Yeah, and frankly, so what? Who cares? Right?
Right.
I mean, because as you and I have stated on multiple occasions, I mean, it's about providing not even just entertainment, but a way of sustaining both the NBA and the NCAA. With the NBA, I mean, it just provides them additional talent. Essentially, the NCAA is the true minor league for the NBA, right? And they have such a pool to pull from because they've got the international game
as well. Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yep. Exactly. For both.
Same thing. So, and yeah, I mean, you bring it back to Trevor Lawrence. You mentioned the quarterback from Clemson. You know, if he comes out after his freshman year, let's say that the it's 2 or 3 seasons rule doesn't exist in the NFL. He's, you know, I don't know who had the number 1 pick in the draft this past year. Was it why am I forgetting that? Either way.
Are we talking NFL or NBA?
Yeah, this past year's NFL number 1 pick.
This past year's NFL number 1 pick was the Cardinals, Kyler Murray.
Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray. So let's say the Cardinals have their choice between Trevor Lawrence and Kyler Murray. I go Lawrence, and if it's me,
yes,
and
me too.
You know, and is he doing any better than what Kyler Murray does? Is he any better than what Kyler Murray is going to be in the next couple of years? We just don't know, but you know, you talk a lot about those sophomore slumps and things like that. So you just don't know what's going to become of a player. So let's also stop pretending that it's for the player's own good as well. A lot of folks will talk about it being a matter of with the NFL anyway. They talk about it being a matter of the player's physical development. Now, I think in the case of maybe a Chase Young who plays defensive end, who's maybe has a little bit of beef to put on, I suppose. Or, I mean, Lawrence isn't a slight guy at all. Murray looks like a shrimp out there, but he's getting it done. You know, the Cardinals are, I guess, I mean, they're okay-er than what they were. You know, they're not going to have the number 1 pick this year. So, I mean, that's working out so far, but it's a rebuild. So, I mean, it seems to be just a confusion of what we're doing it for.
Absolutely. And on the flip side of the equation, a guy like Joe Burrow, who 2 years ago was with Ohio State and wasn't even starting, is now likely the Heisman Trophy winner and probably going to go in the top 5 of the NFL draft, where before the season even started, I think most draft experts pegged him around the 4th or 5th round. So at least in college football, though I do agree with you, sometimes people oversell how much it benefits. For some guys, it does make a huge difference. But with college basketball, it tends to make a lot less of a difference.
Right.
Now, there are guys that do mature through 3 or 4 years and you know, make big strides. But a lot of guys that are staying 3 or 4 years in college basketball before they go to the NBA are doing that because they're not really going to be that good in the NBA and they're not ready.
Right. And at least with college basketball, young players who are fresh going into the NBA, they're more or less playing against their peers too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
you've got guys who are of a similar physical ilk, if that's the argument that you want to make, as ridiculous as that argument has a tendency to be. So, John, we're going to take a quick break, go into the Facebook poll question afterwards, and we'll wrap up a little bit on the Weisman and Young debate.
This is Jenna Burt, host of the Confessions of a Military Spouse podcast here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Confessions of a Military Spouse, where we dig deep and talk about the unspoken hard truths of what it's really like to be a military spouse. A new show comes out bi-weekly. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Confessions of a Military Spouse. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Right back here in the cheap seats on a Tuesday, brought to you by Public House Media. I'm Josh Powers. He's John
I was about
Lauder.
to say, that's me, man.
Oh my goodness. Both of my grandparents are named John. Both of my grandmothers were named Mary. It was really weird.
How is that possible?
Yeah, small towns and non-creative people who were
That's
born
amazing.
in
That's really something.
Yeah, just uncreative boomers, I guess, right? So that's just how that works out. I get confused sometimes. But either way, certainly join me, Josh Powers, and Kayla Zenner, one of Public House Media's fantastic Instagram hosts, as we bring you Tuesday Night Quarterback. Still trying to work out the weird Facebook update, but either way, you're going to watch our video. We're going to break down the NFL in the week that was and the week upcoming on Facebook Live at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 Central. Certainly join us as you will each and every week. Certainly contribute, and we enjoy hearing your comments here and there. John, speaking of Facebook, that's going to be our poll question, talking about Chase Young, the defensive end from Ohio State, who over a matter of $300 is going to miss out on 2 to 4 games of his college career. And on James Weisman, who may miss about the same time for moving to Memphis. Like that's the penalty. That's what he's being suspended for. He's being suspended for the opportunity to go play at the place that he wanted to go play, that he was recruited to go play. When you put it in those terms, it just becomes more and more ridiculous. And so our Facebook poll question, John, is who was done dirtier by the NCAA, Chase Young or James Weisman? Your thoughts?
Yeah, they're both terrible, but just on the dollar amount alone, the Chase Young situation is worse. And the other thing is there's obviously less games in a college football season, too.
Yeah.
So he's obviously missing a much larger chunk. And the other thing is
12 games versus 30, sure.
Yeah, and Ohio State, barring something crazy, is going to be in the college football playoff, whereas Memphis, who is very good and certainly has a shot to go to the Final Four, not nearly as much of a guarantee. So I would choose Chase Young, though both are pretty terrible.
Yeah, much more up in the air. I think just because you had an opportunity to catch something like this earlier, I think the Weisman thing is worse.
Fair enough.
Because it does involve the coach, because it does involve the university, because it does involve a lawsuit. And the NCAA just kind of keeps stepping on its own feet. You would have even thought, from a PR standpoint, exclusively a PR standpoint, we finally did ourselves a favor by allowing athletes to make some money off their likenesses, and eventually Young and Weisman are going to benefit from that. We just made some headway, even though it's a very preliminary step in the process. We just made ourselves look a little better in the eyes of the casual fan. now we go and take another huge step back, which is just so very on brand for the NCAA.
That is 100% correct.
And John, I think it's going to take a lawsuit similar to what Weissman is filing. And it reminds me of another situation years ago now, where Maurice Clarett, you'll remember him, also from Ohio State, had a very brief NFL career at running back. I think Denver ended up drafting him in the 3rd round in the early 2000s. I want to say it was like 2005, 2008, right around then. But he also took some legal action for the right to be able to go to the NFL right out of high school, failed, and then followed seemingly the normal process. And, I guess you could say he washed out. And, I don't know what Maurice Clarett is doing now. I think once the ruling that I just mentioned about players being able to benefit from their likenesses did come out, he had a little bit of a thing to say on Twitter about it, but it didn't really make waves. But John, what do you think it's going to take? What are some other cases that you can think of? We mentioned Derrick Rose earlier, of players just done dirty by the NCAA stepping on their own toes.
Well, the one that comes up for me is Des Bryant.
Sure.
If you remember that situation with Des Bryant, and I think, was it Michael Irvin? Like somebody.
It was an ex-Cowboy, yeah.
Yeah, Deion Sanders or one of them.
Either Deion Sanders or Michael Irvin. I think it was Michael Irvin.
Like took him out to a dinner and he got suspended or something. Like I don't remember the exact details, but it was something that obnoxious. And look, with Maurice Clarett, he basically tried to also leave college before 3 years too. I think he tried to leave after his freshman year. And
that sounds right.
It ended up making the NCAA and the NFL look great because he left Ohio State, waited the 2 years, got drafted, and was god-awful. Whereas if he had stayed at Ohio State, I think he could have ended up being a very good player. So actually, though you could argue that he was done dirty, it was actually to the benefit of both college and professional football because he ended up looking like an idiot. So it actually worked out for them despite it being a negative for him. I don't think college football or the pros were upset at all about how that went down.
No, not at all. In fact, I guess you could say that it proved them right.
Exactly.
I just pulled up the Wikipedia article on Maurice Clarett, and he played for a team called the Omaha Nighthawks.
Yes, I remember that.
I don't know what league the Omaha Nighthawks were in, but
neither do the Omaha Nighthawks, Josh.
Right. But it's funny because you mentioned Des Bryant as well, and he still definitely had something left in the tank, if you ask me, after being released by the Dallas Cowboys, and he's kind of getting some looks here and there, but for whatever reason, he just kind of ended up seeming to be almost just a toxic influence on a team. Although, yep. I mean, I think we've seen other players, particularly at the wide receiver position, emerge a lot more worse for the wear just this season alone.
That is true.
Right. And you could do a lot worse than having somebody who made a little bit of noise and had a little bit of an attitude problem on your team than a Des Bryant. So yeah, it's silly, especially just the matter of, I mean, the idea of boosters in college sports not really having these kind of restrictions against them seems kind of silly to me as well. I mean, a booster is really nothing more than a fan, but who gives money, right? So the fact that there's any regulation against that at all, again, and I'm going to come out sounding like a complete libertarian in these situations. Like, why should you be punished for benefiting from what you have and from what you give? It just seems really dumb that there are rules against that at all. And John, I think ultimately in these conversations that you and I have about how dumb these situations are, it seems like the sooner the NCAA is busted, is broken up, the better that it's going to be for all of us.
Exactly. It's just going to continue being stupid and ridiculous until things change. And obviously the whole likeness situation, that's the first step, but
Step in the right direction.
yeah, more needs to be done for sure.
Yeah, and that doesn't even really have anything to do with player eligibility.
No, that's true.
And that's the real thing that needs to be gutted.
Agreed.
Yeah. So join us on the social media outlet of your choice, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Certainly take our poll question. Chime in on who you think has been done dirtier by the NCAA this week. Anyway, Chase Young or James Weissman. And you've heard our thoughts back and forth. John, as we bring Tuesday to a close, what did you learn?
I learned that we all need to find ourselves a Maurice Clarett Omaha Skyhawks or Nighthawks jersey.
Right.
It's time to find it. It's time to go to eBay, see what we can find.
Yeah, and I guess I learned that I'll be very excited to see what XFL team Des Bryant, Antonio Brown, and other delinquent players end up with, because those are set to be fire.
Oh, I'm
sure.
I hope
as
they're all
well.
the same team. It would be amazing.
That would be an incredible thing, and hopefully Jerry the King Lawler doesn't have to step out on the field and referee games and all that kind of a mess. 2020 can't come soon enough. For John Lauder, I'm Josh Powers, up here in the cheap seats, brought to you by Public House Media. Make sure you follow us on the website or, of course, any podcast platform of your choice. We will see you in the future.